Hello Retro-Tekers, and welcome to episode 3 of the Mac Pro Saga. So in this episode we're going to be stripping the Mac Pro down. We're going to be cleaning it all out. As we've seen in the last couple of videos, this thing is extremely dusty and I don't think it's properly been cleaned out, probably since it was brand new 13 years ago. So I've got on top of it here just a selection of tools that we're using at the moment. This is my main toolkit. In here we've got all sorts of pry tools, different pry tools, tweezers over there. In here there's a general selection of different types of thermal paste, and then we've got a nice screwdriver set there. Let's lift that up, which has a multitude of different ends on there. So that's going to be the main sort of tool that we're going to be using. I've got a Phillips, a longer reach Phillips in case we need it. I've got a selection of anti-static brushes here, which we will use to clean off any dust off any of the circuit boards and make sure it's all clean inside. I've got some nice MX5 thermal paste that we'll be using to replace the old stuff on the 2 CPU heatsinks. And I've also had to go out and purchase this extremely long Torx screwdriver. Now this is to get the securing bolts off the heatsink for the processor. They are extremely far down, and every guide that I've looked at has said to use a long reach screwdriver. I think that is going to be a little bit overkill, but you know, always better to have a little bit too much length, I'd say, than to be too short and stubby. Anyway, so what we'll do now is we'll get all these tools cleaned away and put to where I need them to do the strip down. I'm going to video through the strip down so you'll be able to see how we're going with it. I'm not sure how long this video is going to take. If it starts to go on a bit longer, we might have to do a few time lapses, but we'll see how we get on. Okay, so we'll start by opening the case, release the latch, pull that off. Okay, so that's removed. Let's get that out of the way, somewhere nice and safe where it's not going to fall off. Okie dokie, so the first job we're going to do is we're going to remove these riser boards. When we pull those out, you can see how they are done. So the RAM physically sits in there. There's 4 slots per riser, and there is 2 risers within the computer. So we'll pull this other riser off as well. Okay, so there's a fair amount of dust on there and we're going to clean all those up to have a look. Now, interestingly enough, when we had a look on the actual initial viewing of it, we only saw 2 lots of 4 gig. We didn't see 4 slots used. So we're going to have a look at which one of these aren't reading, because there's some of these aren't reading, because that looks like it should have 16 gigs worth of RAM in it, which would be lovely if it did, because it's got the proper nice heat sinks on there as well to keep it nice and cool. So again, something to have a look at. So once we've got that out, let's remove the graphics card as well. So same process as we did before with this. 2 screws to remove. 1, 2. These are captive screws, then spring loaded onto the little aluminium sheet that comes off. Let's just make sure we've got both of those completely released. Feels better. Okay, so that's come out now. Like I say, they are spring loaded. So we'll pull that out. Now, excuse my head if it's in the shot. Let's remove that graphics card. That's it. That's out. So that's that removed. Okay, so now we're going to remove the 4 hard drive Caddies. Pull those out. So that's the one that's got our 512 gig SSD. The rest of them are just completely empty, numbered up to 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll put them back in the right order. It's nice to strip this down just to clean it all out, you know. When these things get hot, the fans do kick up quite a lot of throughput, and I don't want all that dust flying out everywhere in my room. Okay, so now we've done that, we're going to have a look at removing this here. This is the cable that is for the graphics card. So if you had a higher power graphics card, you'd use this. you can just see the amount of dust that's built up on there. It's it is, you know, computers can dust up fairly quickly, but that is a lot on there. I would have said that was from when it was new. Okay, so now we've done that now, let's have a look at what else we've got to do. Aha! So, interestingly enough, there is no Wi-Fi card. There's a Bluetooth card, but the Wi-Fi slot is empty, which is why we're not showing Wi-Fi. So that answers one of the questions that we had. Right, so now what we've got to do is we've got to get this unit out, we've got to get this top off, and we've got to get this out, all to give us access to those two beefy supplies down there. Okay, so we're going to get this cover off first. So to get this off, you put your hand behind it and lift up, and then simply pull it off. Now, it's magnetised, but as you can see, the magnets over time have lost the stickiness. So those magnets sit inside these sections and hold this plate on with magnetism. You can see the top ones have sort of stuck on, but the ones at the side there have all removed. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to put those back on there for now so we don't lose them. We'll take them off, but we'll have to stick these back on with some adhesive tape or something along those lines before we put it all back together again, just so that we can make sure that this unit goes back on as Apple intended to in the first place. Okay, so that's that removed. Let's put that somewhere safe. We don't want to scratch it. It all looks very nice. Okay, so this unit now has two screws. It has one at the back here and it has another sneaky one right here. I can already tell you that this is going to be colossal when we get this off, because the dust in here is unreal. So we're going to start by getting that screw out from down here. Now this is where the long reach screwdriver comes into hand. I'm going to try and magnetise this just by rubbing a magnet over it to start with. So rub a magnet over there. Again, excuse my head. So let's remove that. Very awkward place. I could do with an even longer reaching screwdriver, really. Okay. Let's see if we can't get that out. Okay. So it's loose, but it's not come out. And then we'll get this one, which is down here. Again, excuse the head, they're in a rather awkward places to get hold of. What we'll do is change tactics. Let's get a smaller screwdriver in there. It's a Phillips. Here she comes. Okay, so that's one screw out there. Let's try and get this other one out. Now, effectively, this should just pull up off there and slide out. Now then, here we are. There's that other pesky screw. So we'll put that to one side, save that somewhere. Now you can really see some of the dust build up in here. I mean, this is fairly dusty. What we'll do is we'll have to clean this out with a hoover, I imagine, to get all of that dust out. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's certainly not the best. What we will do, like that. Okay, so I will now take you further in to the actual computer so you can start to see some of the dust build that we've got down here. Okay, so you can see how tall those heat sinks are. That's why we needed the extra long screwdriver, but the amount of dust that's in this thing is colossal. Okay, so now the next port of call is to get this RAM cover off. That gives us access to get the heat sinks out nicely. So we'll do that now. Set that back down to where it was. Okay, so to get this off, first port of call is 4 screws buried deep. Now these feel like the captive and spring loaded. I can hear the spring. I can feel the spring. So they are. That's nice. That's nice. Okay, so that is that loose. Now we're going to have to basically release the clips from this side, because I believe there's a couple of clips down there that we've got to release to push it across so that we can get that unit out. Okay, so on further inspection it looks like there's two more pesky screws just here. Try and remove those out. How are we going to get at them? Apple obviously didn't want this thing to come out. Those two screws there. Right then, I'll have to see if we can find a different screwdriver and we'll try again. Okay, we've got those two screws out. Those two screws, without doubt, are the most difficult screws I've ever had to get out. I mean, the amount of thread locker on there is immense, but also because it's a funny angle and you can't get a screwdriver straight on, it's just almost impossible to actually get out. It's unreal. Okay, so we need to disconnect that cable, I think, and then this we should be able to just pull out. Okay, have a look. This is all part of learning with these things as to what goes on where. I do believe that this is clipped onto this plastic thing here. So let's just try with a plastic pry tool. I don't want to damage anything. But according to the iFixit guide, there's two clips that should just pull off and it should easily pull out. But that's not the case. So let's have a look and take this a bit further. Okay, so it's actually extremely simple. All you have to do is slide the fan part way into the cage. You can then remove the cage out, disconnect the fan connector, and that is it. We have the whole unit out. Nicely done. It's a shame about those two screws. They were much harder than it needed to be. Okay, so now we can see that the case has pretty much just got the two heat sinks on there. So I think the first thing that we should do is to give the case a bit of a clean up. Once it's all had a bit of a clean up, what we'll do is we'll remove these heat sinks. Have a look at this one here. I'm not sure what that's doing. I think it must be doing the VRMs under here. If we can remove that as well, I've got some heatsink compound. Wow, look at that for some dust, eh? That's some build up there. That's Indiana Jones style dust, that is. Okay, so what we'll do is now is we'll get this all cleaned up a little bit with the brushes. So like I say, I've got these brushes here that we can use to loosen off the dust, and then I'm going to get a hoover in there, not on the board itself, but just to remove the dust as I'm loosening it with the anti-static brushes even. So I'm going to get that done now, and I'll come back when that's all cleaned up. Okay, so that's got the majority of the big lots of dust out of there. So what we'll do now is let's get these two heat sinks off. And then once the heat sinks are off, we can do a bit more of a thorough clean of the board as well. So let's just see what size I'm going to need for here. Okay. That one's too big. Perfect. Okay, so remove these. Again, these should be captive remove that one. So you can see why the long reach handle was needed now. They have to go such a long way down. And that was one. And finally, this one. Make sure that we get it in. That's it. Okie dokie. So, let's disconnect the heat. So let's have a look at that. Ooh, nasty. Yeah, it looks a little bit crusty on there, doesn't it, folks? And the amount of dust that's built up around there. It'll do it well to have a nice good clean. Good 6 heat pipes though on this. They are fairly well built. The amount of dust that's on that side as well. I'm glad we're getting these off. What we'll do is we'll keep these separated because we want to make sure that we keep them in the same order as we got them off. And now let's remove this one. Okay, disconnect that cable first. That'll make it a bit easier. Remove that. And this. This one's the tricky one because you can't see. Just got to rely on the feel. Proving to be a little bit pesky. We're so far down. At least you guys get to see. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while, and yet you still end up with these ones that just, you end up spending far too long. Like the 2 screws for the ram cage, that was ridiculous. Yeah. No need for that. That's it. We got there in the end. Okay, so this is the other one. Let's get that off and have a look at that. Yes, not as bad as the other one, I don't think, but it's still fairly dusty. Put that down there. So that's those off now. Now I'm going to have a look as to what this device is covering here. I don't think it'll particularly need to come off, but what we will do is we'll just give it another bit of a clean round now because we've found a load more dust that was hiding underneath. We'll clean those heat sinks off, we'll wipe them all down, and I'll do that over a time lapse, otherwise this video is going to be about an hour long. Okay, so that's the CPUs cleaned off. It's the heatsink cleaned off. I am going to, I think, remove this. See what it is. If it's got a thermal pad under there, we'll remove the thermal pad and replace it. Let's just have a look what it is. It seems a shame to come this far and not do it. Let's have a look if we can't remove that off. Oh, okay. So I would recommend anybody doing this does the same thing, because have a look at that. We may not have actually moved that. We might have not removed that. and that's got all that thermal paste on it that's gone as dry as anything. It's just completely dry. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to clean all this up. We're going to clean the rest of the board off now. We'll make sure that everything's nice and tidy, and then it's time to start putting everything back together. Okie doke, now that's all nice and clean in there and we know it's all okay, what we're going to do is we're going to get the thermal paste on. We're going to get those heat sinks back in. I'm just going to give these one last wipe over to make sure that they're 100% right, and then we'll put a good healthy dose of MX5 thermal compound on there and we'll get these back installed. Right, the first one we'll do is this chip in the middle here. So, oh. That's a different colour to what I'm used to. The MX5 or MX4 is a nice grey colour. That's certainly not the same colour. Okie doke, let's get that back on. Let's get that tightened back down. I imagine there's some type of way of doing this. What I tend to normally do is get them all in to start with, and I just put a blob on there. I mean, some people do an X, some people do this, that, the other. I always find just a nice blob in the middle will be enough. It's probably a little bit too much, but it is a large chip, so put them all in. Get them all so that they're relatively tight. Okay, we'll go across the chip, tighten them up. And we'll just make sure all of them are nicked. Not majorly tight, you know, it's just got to be tight enough to hold them. Let's plug that back in before we forget. And that's the first one done. Okay, so now we're going to get the bottom CPU in. So we're using the MX5 thermal compound. Now the good thing about this stuff is that it is actually non-conductive. So there's no metal parts in it. There's carbon in it, but there's no metal parts in it. I was a bit confused when I first put it on the other chip because I'm used to MX4, which is grey. This stuff seems to be like a nice baby blue colour. So we're going to put a blob directly in the middle, about the size of a pea. Bird's eye pea, other brands are available, as they'd like to say on the BBC. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll show you there, about the size of a pea on there. Nice baby blue colour. So now we're going to get this installed. So that goes like so. Now we'll tighten these screws down. Start with this one because it was the pain to get in. Okay, and like I say, I just loosely go around and tighten each of them up. Not tight, just so that we know that we've got them all in, because there's nothing worse than going around and tightening one up and finding that it's not quite centralised and one of them isn't going to tighten up properly. So we'll go around all of them. So we've got a nice bit of thermal paste on there. That MX5 stuff is fairly decent stuff as well, so not that we'll notice anything, you know, with the size of these heat sinks. I don't think we'll notice any difference in the cooling ability, but we know that we've put some decent stuff on there instead of just some rubbish. non-branded stuff. This screw is proving to be awfully difficult. Can do with a bit more light. Let's see where I was going. Do this by feel. In fact, I should have. Yeah, we got it. So knock that one off. Knock that one off. Nip that one off. And finally, this one. Okay, so they're all in nicely now. Okay, on to the next one. I'll just gently give this a bit of a wipe off first. Okay. I like to make sure that everything is as clean as it can be before it goes back on. I'll just make sure that we've got all of the dust off this heat sink. Okay, and we'll give the bottom that one last clean. Okie doke. It's better to make sure that these are clean now than worry about it when you've put it in, which I will do otherwise. If I don't do this, I'll start thinking, was that clean? Did I do that properly? It's probably a bit of OCD creeping in. But better off do your job properly, aren't you? Do it properly once and have to do it again twice. Again, I'll just wipe that off. Let's make sure no dust has gone on that. Okay. Get the nice blue thermal paste again in the centre. Peak. Nice bird's eye pea there. Other brands are available. I never know why they say that on the BBC. I mean, as if all of us are going to run out and say, oh, yeah, we're desperate to buy ourselves this pea because James May or whoever said that they liked the bird's eye pea. It's just daft, if you ask me. But it's the world we live in. Again, let's go around these. So far down, but like I say, we know we've done it properly now. Tighten these up now. This one, and last but not least, this one. Now we'll get these connectors plugged back in. These are for the heat sensing diodes that will tell us what the temperature of each of the processors are. I should have done this one before I put that other heat sink on. It's going to be a pain to get on, isn't it? Oh no, it's fairly pain free. So those two are on, that one's on. Right, now that's done, it's down to the job of starting to get everything else back in. Starting with the ram cover, and then we'll go in for the fan unit. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to clean these two units up. I'll do this in time lapse because I want to make sure I get all the dust off them. And then these can go back in and we'll be happy that they're all nice and clean. So I'll start and get to work on this now. Okay, so that's everything nicely cleaned up. So now let's start by getting this ram cover back in. Okay, so I'm going to have to connect up the fan first. Where does that go? And now it goes down here. The problem is I'm using up all my light. I do with a head torch. That's it. Use the other hand. Okay. So we can push that in now. Get that down. Get that into place. Push the fan back to where it's meant to be. So when I said there was no clips earlier, there is some clips. The clips are needed to actually move the fan. The fan's held in place by some clips. So high fix it was as normal, 100% correct. Let's make sure that that's in. Now those screws that were damaged, I'm going to have to try and find some others because I'm not putting those back in. There'll be no point. Completely pointless exercise putting those back in. They're not right, they're not fit for purpose, they're rounded off now. So I'm going to have a look in my box of spares to see if I've got anything that will suffice just to hold it in. I don't think it's particularly needed, but I'd rather they be in there. They were in there to start with, so somebody thought they were needed. I think it just adds a bit of support at the bottom there, it just holds that in. So what I'll do now is I'll go and find where my box of screws are, and we'll see if we've got anything that will work to fit in the place of those ones that are completely screwed up. Pardon the pun. Haha. Okay, so back with the box of screws. Now if you're doing anything like this, repairing stuff, I'd recommend that anyone got a pack of these. They're really useful for this kind of stuff. So let's have a look. Have we got anything? These look like they'll be the closest fit. So let's have a look to see if they'll do the job. Ooh, he says he didn't want to do that, but we've got it. Okay. And they are flying in, of course they are. Okay, perfect. Not the original. I would argue they were better. Come on, Apple. Okay, that's those in. Nice and strong. So now, next port of call is to get this unit back in. Okay, so this slides in on a rail, and the plug for the fan automatically goes in, it's built into the side of it. So now we'll get the 2 screws. It was the black one at the top and the silver one at the side. So this black one, let's get you back in, mister. Sorry again if my head's in the shot. This one's a bit of a pain to get in. Really, I could do with a narrower screwdriver, just like that one. Oh, you know, you use the right stuff. Really, I could do with a long handle one, couldn't I, like one of those Torx ones that we've got. That'd be much better. Okay, so that's that back in. We need to get the bottom screw in there. Now let's be careful we don't lose this one. He says, famous last words. Put the magnet on there just so we can locate it. Okay. Once it's going in, we can take the magnet off, screw that in. Okay, we're getting near there now. All that we've got to do now is to put that part back on, the nice cover over there to complete the nice wind tunnel. However, before we do that, I'm going to have to repair the magnets that have lost the stickiness so that we can actually get that secured back as it should be. So I'll get that done and I'll come back in a minute. Right, okie dokie, so this has now been fixed. It was fixed with using this tape, which is normally used for repairing smartphone screens, things like that, but it's very thin, very adhesive, very strong adhesive to it, so works perfect for that. And I just put them behind each of those. So now I should be able to offer that up. That should nicely click back in place, which it has done. There, that all looks well. Okie dokie. So, in fact, just one. No, that's better. Okay, so that's all that sorted. So now what we'll do is we'll clean out these RAM riser boards. I'm going to do that again in a time lapse because there's a lot of cleaning to do on them. We'll get the riser boards in, we'll get the graphics card back in, and then it's fingers crossed that it still starts up after it's had its heart surgery effectively. Okay, let's get these RAM boards cleaned up. Okay, so now they're all clean, let's get these back in. Let's get these back in here, hang on, slide that in, that's it. And then this one, and that's the RAM reseated. Now we need to get the graphics card back in, and we'll do that in just 1 second. Okay, now for the graphics card. Now you might have noticed that we haven't put the cable back in. We don't need that as of yet, not with this card anyway. This card doesn't use any extra power, it just gets its power straight off the PCIe bus. Okay, so we'll get that back in. We'll screw that down. 1 and 2. That's that back in. Now for the hard drive, caddies. So let's start with number 4, number 3, number 2, and finally number 1, which is the Caddy that has our drive in. Now I've just noticed that this screw here, which should be captive, has fallen out of hard drive 2. Bob that back in. Okay, so that's all that back on. RAM's in. We know the CPU's in. We've connected those back in. We connected the fan back in. Front fans are already connected. All of the temperature sensors are connected back in. RAM's in. Let's get the side back on. Lock it in place. And it's time for a test, which will get it all plugged back in and we'll see if it starts back up. Okay, so here we are. This is always a nerve-wracking bit. It doesn't matter how many times you've pulled something apart or how confident you think you are with something. This bit is always the worst. Let's press that power button and see if we've still got life or see if we've killed it. Okay, so power lights come on. It's encourageable. See if we hear that Apple bong. Oh yes. Let's have a look what's going on. There we are. Okay. Perfect. Let's just make sure that we still find everything. Okay, so we've still got 2 processors. Good start. We've only got 8 gig of RAM still, so something's not healthy there. But we had that before. We've got the GeForce RAM. Let's have a look at the memory and see. So again, it's only showing 2 4 gig, but as we've just seen, we did have another 2 filled. Now it could be that the other 6, the other 2 that are in there, are not compatible or a different speed, perhaps. So there is a way that we can actually have a look at something. So if we go to the system report there, let's have a look in memory. So it can't see the other 2 at all. It only sees those 2. The rest of them, completely empty. Okay. So we'll have to investigate that. But I think that's going to be for a different video. We've set out and achieved what we wanted to achieve. We've cleaned it all out. We've got rid of all that dust. What we'll do is in the next video is we'll clean the outside of it and we'll have a look to see what's going on with this RAM. Because I would really like it if we had another 2 slots in there that we could get working. It could be that they've just put them into a different slot and the CPU can't access it. But we'll investigate that in the next video. I hope this has been entertaining. If you want to see more videos like this of me stripping stuff down, cleaning it out, you know, doing a bit of a restoration of it, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, say that you've liked it, subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.